great to be with everyone again. Seemed like it's been a long time. I miss you all, miss hanging out with my peeps. So today's sermon, Becoming Our Better Angels Through Emotional Intelligence. Most people understand general intelligence, which is the ability to learn, to apply knowledge, and to solve problems. But there is a different type of intelligence, the one that enables people to show empathy toward others, to reflect on our own lives in relation to others, and through self-awareness, regulate our own emotions, and that is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is defined as a way of recognizing, understanding our own personalities and natures, how we think, feel, and act. It shapes our interactions with others and our understanding of ourselves. It defines how and what we learn. It allows us to set priorities. It determines the majority of our daily actions. According to leading emotional intelligence expert Joshua Friedman, research suggests emotional intelligence is responsible for as much as 80% of the success in our lives. When we begin to notice and recognize ourselves in relation to others in the world, we can positively or negatively affect the world and those around us. Emotional intelligence is what enables us to live fully into our values. Without it, what we say we believe in and what we stand for would be but words drifting in the wind. While the area of emotional intelligence is a vast field of study with many strands, there are some strands that stand out for me, namely our ability to reflect and to regulate our own emotions, particularly around our ability to show empathy, kindness, and compassion toward others. Having empathy and compassion and being able to demonstrate them enables us to communicate better, to connect, to companion, and to challenge each other in healthy ways. Social neuroscience is a relatively new field of study that seeks to understand the relationship between biological mechanisms and social behavior between two or more people. It posits that our natural default as humans is empathy, expressed in our helping, our responding to pain, or to someone in need. It is something that lies deep within each of us. Showing empathy, and here I connected with compassion, is a crucial way of bringing meaning to our own lives as well as to the lives of others. We are by nature empathetic and altruistic creatures. At least this is the argument. Empathy through emotional intelligence can be a positive force in people's lives in the world. And while some people are more apt in demonstrating it, it is something that most can cultivate and activate by choice. And I will say more to this point later. Having grown up in Christian fundamentalism and then leaving most of it to pursue the spiritual journey that I'm on today, I now see how truly amazing the human Jesus really was. Looking at his work with the eyes and understanding I now have, I can see how he truly mastered and walked in emotional intelligence. We've all heard the story of the Good Samaritan. Jesus tells the parable in response to a question from a lawyer who asked him, "Who is my neighbor?" after Jesus had urged his followers to love one's neighbor as oneself. The parable depicts a traveler who is beaten, stripped of his clothing by robbers, and then left for dead alongside the road. First, a Jewish priest notices the victim but walks to the other side of the road. Then a Levite comes by and does the same thing, avoiding the man. Finally, a Samaritan, a member of a group that was often despised by the Jews for their impure lineage and religious heresy, happens upon the traveler. He treats the man's wounds, transports him to a care facility, and then pays for his his health care. Of course, we all know the moral of the story. The neighbor figure in the parable is the one who shows mercy to the injured fellow man. This is the Samaritan. While both the Levite and the priest saw the injured man, and while service to others was their primary work, neither did anything to help the injured man. The question is, why? But we've all been there. We've all walked by someone who needed help and we did nothing. The other day, I was working on a project and my daughter came in and she was trying to have a conversation with me, and I wasn't fully present. She began to say, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. And then she said, Randy. I had taught her this a long time ago. If you want to interrupt what someone is doing or saying, just call their name. People usually stop mid-sentence or whatever they're doing at hearing of their name. I have seen this with newscasters as well. And to my chagrin, she's been using it ever since. Now, I recognize that she was trying to get my attention away from what I was doing. I was busy doing what I needed to do. Even though I had heard her, I didn't want to engage her. I chose not to give her my full attention. And this is something we do every day. We shut off that gauge. We get busy with the world around us. Sometimes we can get lost in our own feelings and doings that we don't notice that we are not actively noticing. Or perhaps we refuse to allow ourselves to notice in a way that would then require us to act. Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl stated, quote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our responses lies our growth and our freedom. In a 2001 TED Talk, psychologist and award-winning author of emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman, tells a story about him heading down to a New York subway and noticing a shirtless man bent over, lying on the ground, and people, hundreds of them, walking by and stepping over the shirtless man. None inquired as to his well-being. He indicated that since he had been exploring his own awareness and unawareness, he stopped to check on the man. And when he did, it was contagious. Immediately, others also stopped and noticed. The man was Hispanic, spoke no English, had no money, and had been wandering the streets for days and then collapsed from hunger. After those who stopped attended to the man with food and drink, the man felt refreshed and was soon back on his feet. They recognized the man. In that shared moment, which connected them all, they responded. I've wondered why some people are not morally outraged by the caging of children on our border, or when there are injustices done toward people of color. Is it possible that they, in fact, do notice the child seeking attention, the beggar on the street, and the children in the cages? Perhaps we all notice, but we readily turn off our antennas as to not to give full attention to what needs to be seen. Because when we notice, there's a call to act. Maybe we turn it off because we don't feel that it's always a safe place for us. Maybe we feel it's someone else's job to act. At times we get tired of always doing the right thing. Our ability to regulate our emotions makes us truly remarkable beings, and at the same time can also make us quite menacing. There are those who possess higher degrees of emotional intelligence, who have chosen to use their ability to read people and to then manipulate them for their own satisfaction and personal gain. Goleman also told a story about his brother-in-law who sat down for an interview with the Santa Cruz Strangler. When his brother-in-law finally got around to asking the killer why he did what he did, whether he felt any remorse for his victims, the killer told him, "Oh no, I couldn't have done what I did without first turning that part of me off." Any empathetic feelings for his victims, which had included his own mother and grandparents, had to be turned off. This is what happened in the Samaritan story, not to imply that the priest and the Levite were akin to a serial killer, but to simply acknowledge that people often turn off their ability to show empathy. This helps to answer the question of why we struggle when we have an opportunity to help. We sometimes do, and then other times we do not. In their 2002 work, psychologists Delroy Paulus and Kevin Williams proposed the so-called dark triad, the three prominent personality traits that are offensive but non-pathological. The dark triad includes Machiavellianism, that is, an inclination to strategically exploit and deceive others, narcissism, a sense of entitled self-importance, and psychopathy, a tendency to callousness and cynicism. Building on their work, author and Columbia University psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman developed the light triad as balance to the dark triad. The light triad consists of faith in humanity, believing in the fundamental goodness of humans, humanism, valuing the dignity and worth of each human being, and Kantianism, treating people as ends in themselves, not means to an end. And I must say, the light triad is very much in line with the UU principles. Wouldn't you agree? Kaufman and his colleagues concluded in the 2020 paper that social trust and affiliation with others and a relatively lower expression of an antagonistic and exploitative orientation appears to be a particular productive path to personality development, life satisfaction, and a deeper connection with humanity. Kaufman designed a survey entitled Light versus Dark Side of the Force Test that scores users on 6 personality facets, 3 from both the so-called light and dark triads. According to the survey results, women, for instance, tend to be leaning more toward the light triad than men, as do people in their older age. US senators, however, unsurprisingly, not so much. I took the survey and I skewed more on the light side, as I'm sure most of you would know. And if you want to take the survey yourself, there's a link in the chat section for you to actually take that survey. Perhaps equally crucial is the realization that our dark side is not something we should seek to suppress. People who try to feel more closely to what they think society or others would want to embrace about them tend to try to cut out their negative traits or darker sides. But as Kaufman says, complete suppression never works. The truth will always find a way of popping back, sometimes in full force. Harnessing your dark side is essential to becoming a whole person. Kaufman believes the dark side played an important role in motivating people to join the civil rights movement and to fight social justice. He adds that channeling your aggression toward real injustices in the world and integrating that into your higher level goal is important. Now, I would like to take some time to touch upon what we are now facing as a society. I have a compound question I want to ask each of you, not for you to answer out loud, but simply to ponder, because it goes to the very heart of emotional intelligence. Here's the question. What emotion, what feeling do you recall having when you heard the news that President Trump was infected with COVID-19? Did you feel sadness, anger, compassion, fear, grief, relief, glee? I will be vulnerable with you about what I felt. First, I examined my feelings. I was fully aware that what I was feeling didn't align with my stated values. I visited the pain that some of the president's words have caused me. I examined the anger that some of his actions have created in me. Then I held them up to the light of the compassion that is my calling as minister, father, husband, brother, and son. I can say I struggled with both my dark and light sides. I realized that in that moment, I was not willing to show empathy or to allow myself to feel compassion. But I also understood my responsibility, not solely to others, but to my own heart, to pull the pendulum back toward my center, toward the feeling that would allow for compassion for the president and any others, not for their sake, but for my own. My values tell me that the president and those on the socio-political opposite are not my enemies. In fact, I don't feel that I have any enemies. Even those who say they hate liberals, blacks, and gays, those who would want to physically harm me if given the chance, are not my enemies. They are the ones who have chosen not to allow empathy and compassion to reign in their lives, and most likely have embraced the more darker aspects of who they are. They do more harm to themselves. To be successful in this life, we must remind ourselves of our values. We are the Samaritans in the story, and we espouse to use a love beyond belief. We believe in and hold true the inherent worth and dignity of every person, in justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, the acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process, building the world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and finally, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. We are not individually the web. We are but single strands within it. We make up the web. What we do or don't do affects the whole. And the lie that we are somehow separate has been destroying us and will continue to plague us if we do not find a way to draw more closely to empathy and compassion. When we lift our brothers, sisters, and others, we lift our own selves. When we love our neighbors, we are loving ourselves. And if we feel that there are those who are outside of the bonds of where we can show compassion, just remember, Jesus went further than teaching mere love for one's neighbor. He encouraged his followers to even show empathy and compassion for their perceived enemies. And using the words of Abe Lincoln that reflect the words of Jesus to remind us we are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. May it be so. Amen.